So, hi everybody, good afternoon. Thank you for coming to this session of our main track, Tech for Good, despite the good weather, the warm weather and the cold drinks outside. Thank you for coming. My name is Daniel Braun. I'm from the digital team of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And here's my panel for this session of the future of data for development. So we are talking data now. These days when you hear about data, you think instantly about the data scandals. You might therefore expect that I will talk about some large social network and some institute in Cambridge, but I will not. I find this a quite narrow view of talking about data, and our panel will not have this narrow view. If we talk about Cambridge Analytics, we shouldn't talk about Facebook. We should talk about, from our development perspective, about elections in Nigeria in 2015, about elections in Kenya in 2017. They have also been targeted by Cambridge Analytics. And this firm, in one of the two elections, even worked for one of the main political parties. So, if you talk about data, the question is, where's the relation between data, privacy, and politics? It's not only about our private data, it goes far beyond. And there's a report by Privacy International. And this report says, I will quote, "This is a story on how countries with weak or no legislation continue to be testing grounds for intensive data gathering and experiments with personal data by companies and government." So it's not about our favorite food pictures being leaked or our cat memes or something else. It's about power. Data is power, and data is people. So data matters, and it matters worldwide, not only in the US or Germany, it matters for the development. It can have a good side or a dark side. So this is why our ministry, the Ministry for Development Cooperation, works on this, for us, important topic. We're looking at the potentials, but also on the pitfalls of data. And we want to understand how we can use data better for development outcomes in or for the societies of the Global South. So one outcome of our work is the report discussed in this session, Data for Development, What's Next, Concepts, Trends, and Recommendation for German but also international development cooperation. In the report you will, by the way, find some practical examples of our work in the field of data, which is, for example, a data lab for the African Union, exciting. Our work to strengthen data privacy in the financial sector regarding to development financials, and using big data to better understand labor market needs and see how we can improve the relation between labor market, job needs, and education. But today, we're also here to listen to our experts, but also to all of you, and for me personally, to learn from my daily work. And I'm much interested to hear from you and from our experts, what are the trends in data internationally, but especially for development? I would like to listen to you about negative outcomes of data use. Where can we avoid them? And we're very open for continuing this discussion beyond this panel. We have a stand outside, visit us, as long as it's there, or outside then for a cold drink. It's already warm in here. Find us on our website. Build a link to us. Let's continue to talk about data. But at first, I give a warm applause to our panel, and I hand over the word to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. Hi, so my name is Andy. I'm with the World Wide Web Foundation. As you can see here, I have two experts with me, practitioners working in data for development, Lejla and Gilberto. What we'll do in the next 20 minutes or so, we'll rush through, to some extent, through the report that was mentioned by Daniel, and which you can find here, but also online and at the BMZ booth outside. So what we'll do is I'll go through the main findings over the next 7-8 minutes or so. Then we'll have Lejla and Gilberto share with you some practical examples from their work. We'll then open up for discussion and debate with you. And we'll then have, hopefully, time for a foresight, a future statement of what Lejla and Gilberto think might happen in the next, 5 to 10 years or so in the data for development space. Okay? All right. So as Daniel mentioned, that's the Web Foundation and the Institute of Development Studies with GIZ, we produced a report looking at the future of data for development. So we wanted to find out what's currently happening, what are emerging trends, and what might happen in the future. Because if you work in development, or actually in any sort of enterprise, you don't just want to design initiatives for the present, but you want to understand what's coming up in the future. So that was important. It was important to German development organizations, and that's where we came in. So we spoke to 25 or so experts, and we asked them, what do you think are the main trends in data for development? So before I talk about the 6 trends, I'll talk about 4 key data concepts. So when you talk about data for development, it's quite fuzzy, it's quite broad. So we try to break it down into 4 main data concepts. So what you see here is big data, so large data sets often used to detect patterns of people moving around. Then there's open data. Many of you might have heard of the term, often used in the sense of open government data, so government opening up data and information for more transparency, accountability, such as budget and spending data. So you have an open data initiative in Germany, in the UK, in a lot of countries today. Thirdly, citizen-generated data. So pretty much data that is actively produced by citizens on the ground to better understand what's happening in things like elections, whether there's violence or there's harassment. So people often produce, in these kind of projects, produce maps to understand what's happening in a certain geography. Fourthly, real-time data, quite a new topic, at least in development circles, which is all about quickly collecting and analyzing data to see what's happening in things like humanitarian crisis where time is of essence. So these 4 concepts we use in our research to look at the 6 trends that I'll talk about now. Trend number 1, unsurprisingly, one of the trends that we found is there's more and more data from more and more data sources. So you will have the Internet of Things, social media, nanosatellites, sensors, but also things like drones, in this case do-it-yourself drones, that a group of citizens in Indonesia used to map land right violations in the island of Borneo. And so they were successful with that. They went to court. They showed that coal mining companies were violating the land rights, and they won the case, and the coal mining companies had to stop the operations in certain parts of Borneo. Trend number 2, again, not so surprising for many of you here who are familiar with technology, is about this more and more powerful technologies out there. So be it artificial intelligence, algorithms, blockchain, you name it. So in this case here, in this project example, a project is using radio content, so speech content, converting that to text to be able to analyze the text and look for certain patterns. So in one of the examples that I showcase here, they're trying to understand how public perception of things like HIV/AIDS is changing while a UN organization is doing a public information campaign to raise awareness for these issues. Okay. Trend number 3, new types of actors and partnerships. So when you looked at the development sector 15, 20 years ago, you wouldn't see such a diversity of actors in that space as is the case now. So you have tech firms collecting and analyzing data, working with development organizations. You have companies and startups helping with analyzing data, visualizing it, working with communities to make sense of the data. And in this example here, there's a company called Premise. They collect data with citizens using their smartphones, taking pictures of price tags to see how food prices are changing, and in this case, in the country of Brazil. And they are able to predict food price changes 20 days faster than the official statistics office, which is a massive amount of time for you if you want to address food shortages in certain parts of the country of Brazil. And we have Gilberto here from Brazil, so I don't know, you might know that example quite well. Number 4, the trend that we researched on was balancing data access and privacy. So when you look at the data development space again 5 to 6 years ago, it was all about get data out, use data, try to see what you can do with call detail records, so mobile phone data, satellite data, and all of that. Right now, the debate is much more about balancing access and privacy and data protection. So, for example, in 2014, the Ebola crisis hit West Africa, and there was a huge controversy around whether it should be allowed for UN organizations and other humanitarian organizations to use call detail records, mobile phone data, to understand the spread of the disease, which you can do with mobile phone data because you can track people's movement through the data. And some were saying, you should do that because then you can address these issues. Others were saying, personal data, it has location data and all of that. You shouldn't be, the telco organizations, companies shouldn't be sharing that with others if there's no consent of the users. 5th, the value of granular information. So there's a change in approach happening in many of the organizations working in the space wherein they used to work a lot with large data sets, big data, to understand what is happening. And many of the organizations realized they need more granular information, the information or data collected with users on the ground to understand why things are happening the way they are. So in this example, forest fires, again in Indonesia, one company or one organization using satellite images to understand where fires are happening. But they also send out ethnographic researchers to the field to ask people to find out why certain fires are started by either companies or even communities or citizens in this specific region. 6th and last trend, information inequality is likely to persist. So as Daniel mentioned, talking about power, data as power, what we often see in our work and also in our research is that most of the projects, most of the initiatives in that space are about data extraction. So organizations using data to better understand how people move or what kind of needs people have, but they rarely empower people through data. And there's a trend here, albeit still small. There's more and more organizations working on data empowerment and not so much about data farming or data extraction. This is a really nice project from Paraguay, where one organization is working with citizens, collecting data with them, and then using that data together with the citizens to lift them out of poverty, to understand or to develop certain strategies to get them out of poverty. And that's one of the rare cases that at least I know in that space where this is happening, where real sort of data empowerment is taking place in one of these projects. Okay. That takes me to the next agenda item, which is giving Lejla and Gilberto the stage to talk briefly about their project examples. Thank you.
Yeah, but it's easier for me to start. That's it. Okay, so I'm going to paint a quick picture of Tajikistan. So, can you hear me? Yeah. It's on. I'm going to paint a quick picture of Tajikistan. Tajikistan is located in Central Asia. It has a population of about 6 million people, and it has a mountainous, and in its geography, 93% of the country is covered in mountains. So it means for the majority of for a lot of people in the country, actually getting access and moving across the country is quite difficult. It's also I work in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, which I forgot to mention. It's also one of the poorest countries in our region. 32% of people live under the poverty line. And every year, about 100,000 people become labor migrants in Russia. Currently, the population is, migrant population only in Russia is above 1 million. So that's just to paint a picture of the context that I'm talking about. In Tajikistan, what we're working on right now is civil registry. Approximately 20% of kids that are born every year, out of 250,000, are not registered in the system. What that means is that they have difficulty accessing education services, and they have difficulty accessing health services in particular. So, and this is what the archives look like. If you register on time, the fee to register is about €1.50. Plus, you have to pay travel costs to get to the registration service. If you register late, then the fee is a little bit more, but the process of actually registering your child late is really complicated, and it costs families up to 70, 80 euros, which in a country where I think average salary is $170 is a massive cost. So you have a number of disincentives for people to basically register their children. And that creates additional vulnerabilities. So what we're doing in Tajikistan, actually, as one of the first steps, is to figure out in what parts of the country are the hotspots, right, where these registrations are not happening. I put in a map just so you get a sense of but that's not the actual prototype. Because we have the information from the health management service where where the births are taking place, and we also have the civil registry system which says where are the kids that are registered. But then what we really want to understand, and this is what we're working right now, is why are people not registering their children? If people are not registering their children on time, it's not because they don't want to. It's also because maybe they feel like they don't have to, and there's other incentives. So there's a number of issues. For example, we found out with our research that about 70% of people don't register 75% of people don't register their kids because of how far and how difficult it is to get to the registration center, and because of how much money it costs. So once we understand the different type of, which we're in the process of, to understand the different type of user and the different type of constraints that they feel in terms of or the constraints not that they feel, that they face actually, in terms of getting their registrations, we're planning to work, we'll work with a nudge team, with a behavioral insights team in London to design interventions which would target different type of users. So, for example, women whose husbands are abroad and who may or may not be able to leave the house without someone, or people who have problems because they can't access the civil registration system. One of the things that we're discussing with the Ministry of Justice, which is responsible for this process, one sentence, is to basically grant amnesty for the kids who are not registered. And there's currently 300,000 children who are not registered in the country, and we aim, which is 20%, between ages 0 to 5. And we aim, by the end of our project, actually, to lower the number of registrations to 5%. That's my short.
Thank you, Lejla. Let's give a round of applause to Lejla. Everybody, you want to sit? Okay. Go for it.
Hello. So, I will try to. Oh, no, our faces. Okay, no problem. I'll just read the speech just to respect the time. So I'm Gilberto, and I came from the favela da Maré. It's a huge favela in Brazil, and I'm one of the founders of Data Lab. It's a data laboratory located on this favela in Maré, where it's more than 140,000 people living. We are 7 young people and a lot of partners who develop stories about ourselves through the open data and digital tools, bringing to the main discussion visibility, identity, and participation. Our structure are based on 3 points. The first one is content production. So we make reports and partnerships with journalism schools, alternative newspapers, community vehicles. We have a podcast, and also keeping inventive data visualizations. The second one is training. So we are a laboratory, so we are continuous giving and receiving workshops and residences, making our work continuous training process. And third, but it's not less important, we work with citizen-generated data that Andreas talked about, and we made a map of communitarian communication in Rio State in 2016, and now we are trying to fund a project called Pupuzap. And Pupuzap is a WhatsApp number to map open sewers and open dump sites in Maré. The idea is produce a new database about sanitation with the favelas in the center of discussion, you know, because what the official data says is we have more than 80% of good sanitation in the city, and we know that it's not true. We're also trying to bring the discussions to the SDGs arena, and we don't want to be left behind. Well, I bring these three images to try to explain briefly what we are trying to reach out. This is our group, but you cannot see, so just after we can share some of us. But 2 days ago, and I will stay here in Berlin when I saw all this mess in Brazil, 24 floors building accidentally burned and collapsed at the center of São Paulo. This tragedy bringing to the light a serious social problem in my country that people don't used to talk about, the struggle of homeless people. Just in São Paulo, there's more than 300,000 people living outside. This other picture here is I found 1 day after the accident at the Instagram, and it's a data visualization made in the back of some bus chair, you know, and it says the number of empty properties is bigger than the number of homeless people. And the person who did, quote the source, it's the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics. Well, for me, it's the time when normal citizens like us take the data and understand that we are able to create our own narratives about our problems and dispute for real with the hegemonic powers, you know, so that's my work.
Thanks, Gilberto. So before we move to the future and me asking Lejla and Gilberto about some foresight statement, I'd like to open up the floor for questions or comments or sharing project examples or anything you'd like to share. Not anything, related to the topic, please. Can't really see many of you because of the light. Any questions, anything you'd like to ask? It's just one, yeah, two. Let's have 2 questions, and please state your name and say whether the question is to all of us, or just Lejla, or Gilberto, or me. Thank you.
Hi.
It's on, yeah.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Is it? Okay. Hi, my name is Kolya. My question is to you, Lejla. How did you decide on Tajikistan, and do you believe you can apply your idea of, which is so simple, just that kids can be registered officially, can you apply that to other countries, and are you working on that? And what are maybe your long-term visions, not just for your project, like you said, the 5% goal, but long-term or longer-term?
Yeah, let's have the other question first before you reply.
Hi, my name is Nicholas. I had a general question to you guys, which is that I found it interesting that in the introduction, the colleague from the BMZ was talking so much about Cambridge Analytica and Facebook data. And actually, despite all the talk about Cambridge Analytica, I never actually saw data as something so negative. Because there's also projects that want to use Facebook data, like in general social media data, to leverage it for development, like to see the impact that certain projects have to engage people. And do you know if there's a project like this to use social media data in order to check on engagement with local communities?
Okay. Still another question? Okay. Lejla, do you want to go first? Okay, we'll do it after this round of answering.
So On replication, so I work in Istanbul. We cover Eastern Europe and Central Asia, as I mentioned, and so we work within different programs that UNDP has. So in Tajikistan, we happen to have a big civil registry program because that's a big issue that the country faces. In terms of replicating, I think the approach is actually replicatable across different programs that we work. We're going to test this out to see how it turns out over the next 12 months. But overall, throughout our data project, and this is maybe a change that we've seen over the last year, is that we're increasingly using, like, especially design thinking and ethnographic research to complement just data analytics. That's a brief answer. And then on data for good, social media data for good. In Tunisia, we tracked how people perceive corruption and experience corruption by using Twitter data. So I think there's obviously good examples. We don't have, not that at least I'm aware of examples of using Facebook data, but with Twitter data on like use of public space, there's been quite a good examples. For example, we're measuring one of the SDGs with using Twitter data, and as I said, measurement of corruption. But it's obviously, I think, with social media data, it's or with social media management, you know, we haven't been very good overall, or Facebook has been very good at managing the dark side of it.
Thank you. Gilberto, anything you want to add to that? Okay, then let's have one more question, right? We have 2 or 3 minutes. One more question, and then quick statements, and then we're out of here. Promised.
Only statements.
No statements? Only statements. Okay, only statements. All right, statements. 1 sentence, please, each. Because we talked a lot about the present, the past to some extent, and this session is more about the future than anything else. So what's your view of the future? What do you think is going to happen? What are the key trends, or one trend that you think is going to shape the future of data for development?
Maybe go first. Yes. First.
Yes, I think I think it's about what I said. I think when we bring more diversity to the citizen, normal citizen participation, in the field and the discussion of the data producing and the data narratives. So I think we could start to think about democracy and development and other things. So we need just to share these knowledges and don't be just on the hands of the government, of the companies, but with the citizens. So I think it's it.
I think, well, 3 things, but I'll keep to 1. 1, I think, evidence-based is not a panacea for everything, but using data well actually helps use resources better, target better, and get better results in the development sector. And that, I think there's millions of examples to show that. The other thing I would just like to but that's important to do with the human face, and I think that's where the human-centered design and ethnography comes in. The other thing that I would just like to actually kind of enforce what Gilberto said is to say, I really hope that, while American Congress can bring Zuckerberg there, I don't think that Moldova or Armenia or Georgia can have that kind of power. So I hope that in the future, we're going to have more of collective power actually keeping these tech giants in place who use and make money out of us, not our data.
Thank you. And with this, I have to close the session. Sorry for rushing through the session, but you'll find Gilberto, Lejla, and me right outside here at the Makerspace. And if you want to grab a copy of the report, here are 3, and there's more at the BMZ booth over there. Thank you for joining the session, and feel free to approach us with any questions and thoughts. Thank you.